Hey everybody, welcome back to the 6th round post-fight show with me, Zane Simon, coming to y'all from the end of UFC 308 going down at the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi. And just following the stunning knockout of Max Holloway by Ilia Topuria, I'm flying solo this week. Eddie Mercado is off reffing jiu-jitsu or some shit, I don't know. But he's left me to go all on my own. So I got to process all of my shock and awe and mild grief on my own terms here. Honestly, pretty fantastic card for the UFC. Going with this UFC 308 card was well booked. The rich Abu Dhabi crowd, they weren't that into it all, but we don't expect them to be all that into it. Amazing main event, thrilling co-main event. Lerone Murphy versus Dan Egee was great and a lot of fun. Shah Magomedov against Armin Petrosian was a lot of fun. And, of course, right in the middle of all that, your cooler fight, bathroom break, Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakic, putting on exactly the low-stakes kickboxing bout that everybody expected. But I'm always a fan. I'm always happy to have the little, tone change, tempo change fights in there. I think your great cards should have a little bit of everything, and this felt like it had a little bit of everything. So, really good card, and I'm also always happy to have a morning UFC event. Get through these fights, watch them all early, go do something else with your day. So, yeah, let's get into it. Featherweight main event, Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway. And I was primed and ready and prepped for disappointment here on this. I picked Ilia Topuria going in, figured his power and his ability to press and stay on the front foot and Holloway's willingness to work the back foot and counter would just be too big a hill for Holloway to climb. But this fight did end up pulling back into that heart-wrenching territory just a bit because Holloway was doing really damn well. Honestly. His height, his length, and his diversity of skills, I think were giving Topuria a lot of trouble, a lot to think about and look at, especially with counter opportunities. That was something I was kind of worried about for Topuria going in, is that Volk, as a pretty reach height parity fighter for Topuria and somebody who's not a big he's a good kicker, a good low kicker, but not a big diverse kicker, not somebody who can just kind of uncork. You don't see a lot of Volkanovski high kicks, body kicks, spinning kicks, that kind of thing. I figured Holloway could bring something extra to this, and I think he did. He had Topuria looking worried through the first round, and he was just absolutely holding his own. He was keeping to when Topuria pressured. Topuria looked great. He landed big shots. He got a lot done, but he was not pressuring that consistently. I think Max was giving him a lot to think about early on. And we would see Topuria taking steps back, giving a lot of open space, giving Max time to get his jab working and catching Topuria on the way in with his jab, stopping Topuria's pressure with his jab a lot early in this fight. So it really felt like Holloway was doing well. I gave Holloway the first round. Second round came around. It was very close. Holloway got back into the round late. He got wobbled early, so I figured it was 1-1 going into the third, with Topuria landing the bigger, harder shots. But Holloway, when Topuria was not pressuring, it basically felt like Holloway was winning this fight. And then the other part of this equation, the reason that even thinking, okay, Holloway has options here, he can do some things that Volk can't do, he's never been knocked out, all these things, the big equalizer here was really that Topuria isn't just a good pressure fighter. He's a good pressure fighter with huge power. And as somebody else is pointing out here, a deadly pocket counter fighter. And he just had that huge reaching right hand as Holloway backed out of the pocket. And it crushed Holloway, caught him right on the jaw. And even with Holloway fighting a good fight, this is something we saw against Dustin Poirier first time he went up to lightweight, is that even when he was fighting a good fight with Poirier, even when he could have like middle success in the middle distance where you're like, oh yeah, for a minute or two, Holloway is just winning this round and looks great. That power differential is just too big. Holloway is a good puncher. He's a slick puncher. He's an accurate puncher. But he's never been a big power puncher. And he could not match Topuria. And then, you know, this day was always going to come sooner or later. I hoped it wouldn't be today. Prayed it wouldn't be today. And Holloway had to get knocked out someday. He's always taken a lot of shots in his fights. His style has always been to be willing to take one to give three. And he's always lived a bit on his chin, and sooner or later that had to come to an end, and this was the time. Seeing also that two judges had it, 2018 Ilya, I get that. There was it's hard to even say it was a slip in round one at the end of round one. It's that weird thing of it's an off balancing. And Holloway got into the pocket, saw the counter coming at the end of round one, and tried to get back out of the pocket, leaving his feet behind. He really kind of, leaned way back to try to slip the shot. So when the shot clipped him, his feet were already out from under him. So he went down really easy on the shot. It's one of those things where I wouldn't technically call it a knockdown, but judges watching live, he got hit, he fell down. I can see how you'd have it 2018 Topuria. I like it as 1-1. Like I say, in general, my feeling was like Max could have 2 or 3 minutes of success around in this fight. And that those other 2 minutes of success for Topuria were big enough that it was, Topuria could win whole rounds off of those other 2 minutes of success. Couple notes here. Somebody had a question. Where does Holloway go from here? And honestly, yeah, I mean, he should go to 155. I don't really see what is there for him at featherweight. He talked about, I'll be back and we'll fight again and all that. But like Volk has already been a huge stopping point for him in that division. He's already beat every other contender of his generation, and having him pick off, guys like Arnold Allen or Diego Lopez and fighters like that, I just don't think it serves the division at all. And I don't know that it really serves Holloway all that well either. He could stick around there, but I definitely think something like fighting guys like Chandler and Oliveira or a rematch with Poirier, fights like that have a lot more interest and meaning for Holloway at this late stage in his career than trying to chase Ilya Topuria back again. The UFC brought Volk into the octagon again had made Topuria agree to fight Volkanovski again. And even that to me feels like I don't really want that. Yeah, we've got people saying Ilya Topuria versus Diego Lopez. That seems like the obvious fight to make for me. Don't waste. Diego Lopez is having a moment. He is in his prime. He is winning big fights. He's made himself a contender without having to go through Volk or Holloway. Use that. This is his moment to do that. This is his moment to make that happen. Volkanovski just got knocked out twice in a row. I would much rather see Volkanovski do something like go fight Arnold Allen or go fight Josh Emmett or go fight, I don't know, somebody else up at the top of that division. Let me see. I want to get the rankings up here. I forgot to prep myself just because I'm now since I'm doing this all on my own. I just dove right in without anything. But looking at the bantamweight division, like, yeah, I don't know. Go fight Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling versus Volkanovski would be a hell of a fight to make. Something like that. I mean, I know Aljo's fighting Evloev, but even if Aljo beats Evloev, do Aljo Volkanovski. That would be a fascinating fight to me. I don't really honestly want to see Volkanovski back fighting Topuria next. I would much rather see Lopez in that spot. So, and then, yeah, I also saw, I'm in my live chat that I run for over on my Substack. Plug my Substack here, Zane Simon, zanesimon.substack.com. Check it out. It's all free. I do weekly scouting reports, some other movie bullshit that nobody cares about. And we do live threads for every UFC card. And somebody mentioned that they would really love to see Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev at some point. And you know what? Honestly, too, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see, with Topuria coming off of back-to-back KOs of Volkanovski and Holloway, I want to see Diego Lopez in there because this is his moment. I also think he works Diego Lopez, so I think this is also a time to, like, this man just beat two of the consensus greatest featherweights of all time. You can do something big with him right now. Somebody saying best back-to-back win in MMA history. It's way the fuck up there. It's an incredible achievement to beat those two men back-to-back, and especially to beat them both by knockout. It's one thing to beat, like, to beat a couple of great fighters back-to-back where you're narrowly scraping out decisions and just kind of gutting out really hard fights. You've got Volkanovski beating, like, Aldo and then Holloway back-to-back. I think, didn't he? Yeah, beating Aldo and Holloway back-to-back, and those are great wins back-to-back. But they were narrowed. They were decisions. It was a solid workmanlike decision over Jose Aldo, and it was a highly contested decision over Max Holloway that a lot of people thought was, could have gone either way. And so to come out and knock out Holloway and Volkanovski back-to-back is incredible. So yeah, great win for Topuria. They should be doing something with him more than a Volkanovski rematch. Honestly, I love Volkanovski, but putting Topuria back through a rematch after that just feels like the least interesting option to me. All right. Before that, middleweight bout, Khamzat Chimaev, Robert Whittaker. Somebody noting here, DC just apparently showed on the broadcast that Whittaker had broken teeth from that face crank. I figured he also dislocated his jaw from it. I just finished writing an editorial about this too. It has to be said, I have been I don't want to call myself a Chimaev doubter because I honestly do think and have thought all the way through that he's really quite good. But I have been a little underwhelmed by Chimaev against the very best competition he's faced, and have kind of felt like there might be a point where he really falters against one of the, string of top contenders he's going to be facing and has been facing. And now I have to wonder if Khamzat Chimaev isn't the best round one fighter in MMA history. Honestly. Like, I don't know that there has ever been a fighter who is so absolutely, unquestionably surefire dominant as Chimaev is in the opening round. I would, I have been thinking a lot this week, even going into this fight, comparing him to Conor McGregor, where I think he has a lot of the same sort of strategizing and thought of MMA and how he approaches fights as McGregor, where McGregor comes in 2 round ones in his fights absolutely keyed up, absolutely, and not just on coke, I mean, but like locked in, dialed in. There is no version of Conor McGregor that is more confident than he is the moment he steps into the octagon. That is him at absolute peak confidence. And for most fighters, it doesn't work that way. We saw for Topuria here against Holloway, he didn't look all that happy with the first round of this fight. He had to feel his way into the fight a bit. And he, it was something that he had to build towards. And we've seen for Holloway a lot too, that he often, he gets his jab working, he gets his 1-2 working. He kind of feels out what the fight's going to look at, and he builds on that success. Volkanovski is that kind of fighter too. Anderson Silva would very famously just kind of, screw around and try to get opponents overthinking things early in fights and getting them to make mistakes so he could take advantage later. So, there have been a lot of amazing fighters who do not start fights that well. McGregor is one of the great opening round fighters out there, and Chimaev has easily entered that territory. And considering how quickly McGregor ended up falling off the map after he found his greatest success, and this may be true of Chimaev too. Chimaev certainly doesn't seem like somebody. He seems like somebody who has often not wanted to fight. He's talked about retiring before when he got sick. He's talked about wanting to go join the holy wars in Palestine. So it could very well be that we see that same kind of thing with Chimaev. I don't think it'll be nearly the same sort of self-destructive nature that McGregor has, but not discounting that out there. But I have to put Chimaev in that same category, and maybe even higher up in that category as the all-time great first-round MMA fighter. So it is absolutely something where this win over Robert Whittaker was possible. We all knew it was possible. Some of us even thought it was highly probable. I picked Whittaker going in, so I have to eat a little crow. But even picking Whittaker, my feeling was, look, Whittaker, when he loses, he absolutely melts down. He makes a mistake or has one thing go wrong, and then everything just goes away. Whittaker's not the kind of fighter where when things go really wrong for Whittaker, he often just loses right then and there. He's rarely a fighter who just gets beat and keeps getting beat and survives and sees out the fight. So him getting blown out isn't that big. It isn't that shocking for a fighter of Chimaev's quality, but it is a mark of Chimaev's quality, which is the point I'm making. We can now say Chimaev can do this to just about anybody. somebody asking, do I think Chimaev beats Bo Nickel? Absolutely. I think Chimaev beats Bo Nickel. Nickel is somebody I need to, I do think he can be a very good fighter, but we need to see so much more from Bo Nickel to prove that point at this point right now. Like I'm with Nickel where I was with Chimaev when he was dusting like Gerald Meerschaert. Like having to struggle for a round and a half with Cody Brundage to get him out of there, and have like kicking Jamie Pickett in the dick. These are not things that make me suddenly feel like Bo Nickel is absolutely the future of the middleweight division. He's a very, very good wrestler, and he is learning to strike, but there's not nearly the level of comfort in the cage for Nickel as there is Chimaev. So right now, if you put them in the cage together, I would pick Chimaev in a heartbeat. I wouldn't think about it, honestly, at all. But yeah, I mean, I still have every question about Chimaev late into fights. We have seen against Usman and we've seen against Burns that he can be totally dominant in that first round. He's an amazing first round fighter. And even if he doesn't go away, he doesn't collapse. He's not terrible after the first rounds, but he is aimless often. He doesn't have the same drive for takedowns when he has to strike, when he feels like he is stuck striking for long periods. He clearly does not love striking. He does not love being forced into exchanges for long periods of time. It makes him uncomfortable. So I still have those questions about him. And more than anything, those questions really make me want to see him fight DDP, make me want to see him fight Dricus du Plessis, because du Plessis is a mess and will absolutely give every opportunity for Chimaev to go out there and put hands on him and take him down and be a bulldozer early. But du Plessis will also just absolutely not get discouraged by that in any way and keep fighting and keep pressing and keep being a gigantic, angry golem of a fighter for round after round after round. So that fight has to happen. We're talking about if Strickland gets the title shot. Like, I can't imagine the UFC giving Strickland a title shot over Chimaev. They have been waiting for Chimaev to be a thing since his first win in the UFC. The moment Chimaev stepped in the octagon and absolutely pasted John Phillips and Reese McKee, as uninspiring as those wins were, the UFC was talking about him as a title challenger. They would have put him in much. They tried to give him a welterweight title shot, but he got too sick and then couldn't manage his weight. He's been primed to be a title contender since day one. Strickland, he's a fighter who he had to win how many fights in a row or how many fights overall to get his title shot? Like, his title shot, and even then it was a short notice. Adesanya was supposed to be fighting who was he set to fight for that originally, and then Strickland stepped up. I can't even remember now, but it was supposed to be a different fight, and Strickland was ready to go, so he got the fight in that moment. Was it the du Plessis? Yeah, it was du Plessis. That's right. They gave du Plessis that Whittaker fight too close to the Adesanya, to when they wanted Adesanya to fight, and du Plessis was injured and wasn't ready, so they gave Strickland the fight instead. That's the only reason he got the title shot. The UFC doesn't have any interest in Strickland being a title shot. It's not going to give it to him off a split decision over Paulo Costa. It's just not going to happen. So I have to assume that Chimaev is now front of the line. He's going to get the Duplessis title shot, and probably won't be in South Africa because South Africa is probably not going to pay the UFC $15 million, $20 million for a pay-per-view card. So it'll probably end up in the Middle East or something like that. I don't know. But it's got to be on the horizon. As for Whittaker, unfortunately, I don't know. He's already he's fought so many of the fights that he would need to fight at middleweight. I guess you stick him in there with Nasruddin Imavov or something like that. Or you give him guys like Brendan Allen or something. I don't know. Whittaker's just going to keep being out there fighting guys forever. I get the feeling. This was, I don't want to say it's the end of Whittaker's time being in the opportunity, getting the opportunity to be a top contender. He's only 33. I know he's been doing this forever, so it certainly could be the end of his time as a top contender. But it's definitely time where if he wants to fight for the title again, he's just going to have to circle around and tread water for another few years until he builds up the wins to get another shot. Otherwise, light heavyweight bout, Magomed Ankalaev, Alexander Rakic. This was booked to be... I get that the UFC is just trying, they don't have any interest in Ankalaev, so they're just finding him whatever fights they can in the top 5 to keep him busy to see if they can find some other title fight for Pereira. But booking fights like Ankalaev versus Blachowicz and Ankalaev versus Rakic, you're just asking for boring fights that nobody gets thrilled by. You've got, in each case, very consistent, risk-averse range strikers who like to counter and who don't put themselves in a lot of danger and tend to favor, high percentage, low power strikes. And you're not going to get thrillers out of that. It was shitty when they did it, when they booked Ankalaev Blachowicz, and then Dana White came out and blaming them for having a boring fight. You booked these guys knowing full well who they are, and you booked Ankalaev Rakic knowing full well who they are. They'll probably give him the title fight anyway, just because there's no one else cleared, ready for Pereira to fight, unless he wants to go up to heavyweight and fight Tom Aspinall or something like that. They talked recently. Aspinall just said, "Oh, the UFC came to me and they have a plan for me." Is that plan Alex Pereira? Because if it's not, then I don't know. You're doing Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane off a win over Volkov, I guess, or Tom Aspinall versus Jailton Almeida off a win over Sergey Spivak. There's not an inspiring option for Aspinall, so maybe that's where they end up with. But if they don't have something crazy like that planned, then Ankalaev has to get the title shot. For Rakic, this is just another disappointing setback. It really, it's too bad for him that he's now coming off of 3 losses in a row, or three losses in a row. And I mean, Jamal Hill and Jan Blachowicz are both coming off losses, so Rakic could rematch Blachowicz since he had that nasty knee injury the first time, or he could fight Jamal Hill. That'd be fine. Or they could give him a bigger step back and he could fight Roundtree or something like that. But oh yeah, somebody mentioning the corner advice. Rakic's corner telling him he was up 2 rounds clearly is all-time bonehead dog shit cornering. I don't know how corners haven't learned this. They know the MMA corners know the MMA landscape well enough to know that they never get to throw in the towel, or they know that they never, should treat injuries or be concerned like it matters. They understand MMA math well enough to do a bunch of other shit. But for some reason, no MMA corner seems to have learned ever that there is never a reason to tell your fighter that they are up clearly at the end of a fight unless their fighter is up so clearly that they already know it. Unless your fighter has been on top of their opponent, ground and pounding them for 2 rounds easily, there's no reason to tell them that they're up big. If the fight has been contested on the feet and nobody's been knocked down and nearly knocked out in the fight to that point, you should, as a corner, assume that you absolutely do not know what the scoring is. I thought that Carlos Leal clearly beat Rinat Fakhratinov early in the night, 30-27. And he lost 30-27 on one judge's scorecard. So telling Rakic he was up clearly 2 rounds when he was much, much more likely to be down 2 rounds is just terrible coaching, terrible cornering. MMA corners remain the worst. Somebody asking if I think that Rakic, they'll pass on Magomedov for Ankalaev for a title fight. I don't think they will. I think that Dana White will swallow his disappointment. He will not be excited about it at all, but they will give him that title fight because there's just nothing else to do. So, and then they'll try to sell it like he deserves it, and he'll just, pass over all the times that he painted the guy as somebody who shouldn't be there, and it'll all just move on. So I expect Ankalaev will get a title fight coming off of this win. That brings us to a featherweight bout, Lerone Murphy, Dan Egee. Great fight. Murphy fought like he really had not paid any attention to Dan Egee going into this bout, honestly. That hook he got countered on was just him way, way overstepping and overthrowing, getting out over his feet, hanging himself out there for a huge counter. I talked about this a lot in the lead up on the Vivi. Egee is a guy who he doesn't really have a range game. There's not really a range fighting version of Dan Egee. He's always he's always difficult. He's always powerful. He's always looking to counter. He is a good scrambler, a good grappler, and he's just a dangerous fighter. He has one of the best chins in all of MMA, but you have to mind the pocket. And if you mind the pocket, which Murphy did almost all the rest of the time, or just fought through the scrambles and took advantage of Ege's willingness to scramble and the fact that Egee can tire and that his cardio isn't always great. If you mind the pocket, win the scrambles against Egee, then there's a path to beating him, but you have to be mindful of that all the time. And Murphy started this fight like he just wasn't considering it. So he gave Egee a lot to work with early on. Egee got to pressure a lot, got to land a lot of big shots. It's credit to Murphy and his own durability that he can bounce back, and that his conditioning as well, that he can bounce back from those shots and keep going and keep his feet moving and keep working really hard late into fights. And solid win for him. The win that I had expected him to get, but he took the hardest path to get there. And yeah, somebody like Diego Lopez in that division could really, really make him pay for that kind of work. After the fight, he called out Josh Emmett. I like that call out a lot. It seems like a very sensible fight. Could also do Murphy Allen. Those are both really good, sensible matchups for Lerone Murphy. They're both really difficult fights for him. There are fights like against Emmett. Emmett more than Egee. Emmett has a speed change to his game. Wait, what? Somebody telling me Khamzat Chimaev tested positive he failed his drug tests? We serious right now? Okay, come here, just a sec. Chimaev, I gotta look this up. Sorry. I'm not. Okay, where? Some source is saying he had PEDs in his system. Okay. Please don't scare me. That's totally different. Totally different story. I'm gonna ignore that. The UFC is doing their own drug testing in-house. I am okay. Thank God. Don't stop, dude. I love you, but don't overpost like that, please, for my sake. You need to do your own. Do some double checking if you're gonna fill. Yeah, I'm not. The UFC's doing their own in-house drug testing. I am not worried about Khamzat Chimaev failing a drug test anytime in the near future. They have raised levels for PEDs across the board so that as long as whatever's in your system is only at a background level for a lot of this stuff, like, oh, it could be a tainted supplement for a lot of substances now, they are just going to automatically arbitrate and write it off as not a failed test. That was one of the big changes going for their own drug testing system from USADA, is that USADA was very hard line. Any amount of these drugs at all is going to be treated like a failed test, or very low limits for those things. And their new system is very much like, oh, we're still testing for all that stuff, but we now have thresholds that as long as you're under the threshold, we're just going to assume that it's a tainted supplement or something like that and not worry about it. I'm not worried about Chimaev failing a drug test. All right. What was I talking about? Jesus. Yeah. So Arnold Allen or Josh Emmett, if he gets that fight, Emmett is not a way more diverse striker than Egee, but he has learned to change speeds really well so that he has a slower power punch and then a faster power punch. And that alone might be enough to really, really fuck Murphy up if he has the same kind of brain fart moment that he had against Egee. So we'll see. I think Emmett Murphy is a great fight to make. I hope the UFC books it. As for Egee, just, keep him in all the fun fights. Giga Chikadze just lost to Arnold Allen. He hasn't fought Dan Egee. Do Giga Chikadze versus Dan Egee. That would be an awesome fight. So, okay, Calvin Kattar already beat Egee. That's right. So, yeah. Chikadze Egee. Why not? All right, that brings us to a middleweight fight. Sharabutin Magomedov, Armen Petrosian, and I don't want to say Shara Bullet is for real. I don't want to be the hype guy now, especially as I've been like an anti-hype guy and all that. But Shara Bullet is really fast and really dedicated to volume. He is elite in his speed. He is getting, as noted, he's getting better at MMA. He's getting more comfortable with all of it. He's figuring out more and more how to key his offense to defend takedowns, what kind of offense works. He eats everything thrown at him in the pocket, flush and full power. His defense, he's got great kick defense. I'll give him that. His defense above the waist is terrible, but he is throwing his hands more. He is fast as hell, and he's creative. And until he beats somebody, or until he faces somebody that can really just hit him hard enough to knock him out, or wrestle him hard enough that he just cannot get by with having mediocre or bad takedown, merely bad takedown defense, no longer awful and truly abysmal. Until that happens, he's going to keep winning. Armen Petrosian, being a low power, throw slightly less volume kickboxer who has okay but not good wrestling, that was a really good matchup for Magomedov. And Petrosian still did really well early until he got discouraged by the absurd speed coming back at him and started to second guess himself. And the moment he started to second guess himself, those counters and those shots were just terrible. Yeah, I'm seeing recommendations: Shara Bullet versus Hobocop, Shara Bullet versus Michelle Pereira. Those would both be great fights. Looking at the UFC rankings, talking like bottom of the middleweight division here. Yeah, Pereira coming off a loss. Let's see, UFC. Get the UFC roster wiki. I love the Hobocop fight a lot. I just don't know if he's booked right now. Let's see. Where's middleweight? Gregory Rodriguez is coming off a win. That would make a lot of sense. Yeah. Anthony Hernandez is probably rising too far up the division to take that fight, but if he would, you know what? I'd watch Anthony Hernandez fight Shara Bullet just because I want to be mean. I'm always up for an Iron Turtle booking. Or, you could book him in there with Roman Dolidze, honestly. I wouldn't hate it. That'd be a really good fight for Magomedov. And then, of course, too, there is one fight that actually, it is given where everybody is given where both men are in their careers and some of the victories they've had, just saw the fight I actually want to see, just Shara Bullet versus Joe Pyfer. That is a stupid fight, a stupid violent fight that I want to see. Just the palest, reddest dudes on the roster throwing absolute hammers at each other. Tons of speed, tons of violence, zero defense. I want it. Not talking Mario Batista, even with Eddie gone. Well, with him, I'm not here. It's just no fun. So I'll wait until he's back to rub his face. Okay, that brings me to a light heavyweight bout: Ibo Oslon, Rafael Sakara, and I should eat a little crow here. Feel a little stupid. A couple of people said very deliberately that Oslon was he was going to crush Sakara because Sakara is himself a terrible can crusher. And I was like, man, Ibo Oslon is not good. This man lost to Anton Turkali, who's the least effective light heavyweight that I can ever remember the UFC signing. I have no reason at all to think that Oslon is just a shoe-in to win here. And Oslon beat Sakara like a rented mule. So credit to all of you who were out here saying Ibo Oslon is way better than Rafael Sakara. Sakara is clearly just not ready to fight at this level at all. Oslon is still, seems to me like a guy who took up MMA just to get chicks, but that's clearly a better base than just taking up MMA to beat guys that don't know how to fight. So I don't know. Good fight, great showing for Oslon, just absolutely beating the brakes off Sakara for a minute straight before the referee decided that he'd seen enough and had to step in and wave it off. I'm not sold on him at all, but this was, clearly he is better than the absolute worst guy that the UFC could bring into the organization. All right, that brings us to a welterweight sadness fight. Jeff Neal, Rafael dos Anjos. Oh, yeah, and he had that wild post-fight interview. I was tuning it out, and then he was so loud about it and yelling so much that I had to pay attention, talking about having the death touch and how he was going to kill every light heavyweight in the division. And just like, you know what, man? Go crazy out there. You might as well. But yeah, Jeff Neal, Rafael dos Anjos, another real sad days fight. I've never liked RDA at welterweight. It's never seemed like a good fit for him. He's always had a game that was a physical bullying pressure game. Stick you on the fence, grind you against the cage, pull you down, take you to the mat, put the grind on you, be able to get in the pocket and mix it up with you without too much fear of not being able to eat the power shots coming back at all and all that. And that just isn't him at welterweight. At welterweight, guys are too big. They hit too hard. His game does not have enough power in it. And so, yeah, a fight like Jeff Neal, you put him down at welterweight or lightweight rather, and Jeff Neal might look a lot more like Paul Felder at welterweight or at lightweight, or Anthony Pettis or somebody like that. One of those RDA fights, thinking that RDA, in an era where RDA isn't 40. So yes, happy 40th birthday RDA. You get amnesia. You get to forget that you get to celebrate your birthday again tomorrow because you will have forgotten it. But yeah, already, going out there against Neal, he just gets crushed by the first shot. Seeing RDA on his back looking to play guard after getting crushed is just pure sad times. And then to have him just like blow out his knee right after that, it really just made me that's just such an old man way to lose. So this was a very good performance for Jeff Neal. It was a very old man performance for RDA. I don't really need to see him back out there again, especially not at 170, but it's MMA, so I'm sure he will. And he's a former champ, so the UFC isn't about to cut him. So, yeah. For Neal, he's talking about going back to a title shot. I know he's only 34, so I think. So he's not like, it's not one of those things where I can just be like, oh, no, Jeff Neal couldn't possibly. But it also really feels like Jeff Neal's his moment his time to shine was 5 years ago. That was him at his pinnacle. And then he had a bunch of illnesses and injuries, and he lost fights to Stephen Thompson and Neil Magny, and beating Ponzinibbio, Luque, and RDA right now, it doesn't make me feel like he's about to turn around and go fight for a belt. Calling out, going back to fight Bilal, and yeah, I know he has a win over Bilal and all that in the past, but it's just he would have to win several fights that he's not going to win. Right now, I would match him up with Joaquin Buckley or Michael Morales, see what he can do. But I don't, no, if Bilal beats Shavkat, I do not think Jeff Neal is next. If Bilal beats Shavkat, then Jack Della Maddalena is much more likely to be next. Or Sean Brady is more likely to be next. Or Ian Gary is more likely to be next. Jeff Neal, I do not see how coming off losses to Gary and Shavkat, even off this win, is going to bring him back up to the top of the division. So, yeah, MVP would also be a solid fight for him. Like I say, Buckley, Morales, MVP, those are all fun. Those are all solid. I don't see him winning all those fights. Maybe he's got the power still. He's got the speed. Could happen, but it's not. I'm not really excited for Jeff Neal. Even off this was a solid showing for him, but this mostly just felt like I was watching the ghost of RDA. So I need to see a lot more from him to get excited. All right. That brings us to a lightweight bout. Mateusz Rebecki, Magedov or Alby, and hell of a fight. Absolutely killer fight. Amazing war. I hope this won fight of the night. It did. Good. It should have. I talked about it on the Vivi. I was really worried going in. I picked Oralby, but I was really worried going in that he was going to hit a wall because he's not that physical a force as a fighter. He's a fighter who he gets a lot done on heart and determination and pressure, and he's not the best athlete out there, and he does not have good striking at all. He's a very awkward, very operating on pressure and attitude to get his striking done for him. Throws a lot of arm punches, fights with his face a lot. And so I figured Rebecki could really touch him up in round one and win the first round and then maybe lose the rest of the fight. And he absolutely crushed Oralby in round one. So it was a huge, way better performance from Rebecki in the first round than I thought it would be. Credit to Oralby. I don't think the doctor covered covered the good eye when he did the hold the fingers up. It was like that or something. So he was able to see how many fingers were being held up. And Oralby came back and won the second round, got back in there, still got his eye crushed a few times, but put on a hell of a performance coming back from round one. And then both men nearly died in the third round. And I think you have to score that for Rebecki because Oralby the only reason Oralby got back into round three is because Rebecki beat him so badly, so close to death that he himself was totally gassed, and that allowed Oralby to pour it on late. But you still can't forget that Oralby was nearly dead in that round. was nearly just totally out. Should have been stopped. Should have been stopped in round 1. Should have been stopped in round 3. It's a well-earned win for Rebeski. He did a great job showing his heart and not letting Aralby's constant, unyielding pace and pressure break him down the way that he allowed Diego Ferreira to do that to him. So, great bounce-back win for Rebeski. For Aralby, this was a loss he had coming, and hopefully he learns some lessons for it, works on his striking a lot, works on his defense a lot, because the heart and the attitude and the wrestling are all there for him, but he cannot just take that kind of punishment to win. Somebody fight of the year, number 2 fight of the year. It's a very good fight. I don't want to call it fight of the year just because the stakes aren't there. I think you really have to go to your biggest fights that are also then your most thrilling to get your fight of the years, but it's way up there. I mean, it's as absolutely good as any prelim fight could ever be. You know, it's way up there on your Spencer Fisher versus Sam Stout scale. All right, that brings us to a middleweight bout. Abus Magomedov, Bruno Ferreira, and Ferreira he's got great power, but the rest of his game just doesn't exist. Abus Magomedov looked in shape, still got exhausted, so that's a huge red flag for him. But his game is, it's an inch deep and a mile wide. He can do everything he needs to do to stay in a fight if his opponent can't really take the fight over in any one area. And Ferreira is a fighter who absolutely can't take a fight over in any one area. Just doesn't have the consistency of form, doesn't have the consistency of approach, doesn't have a plan in fights, doesn't have a process. And so he had a big moment against Abus Magomedov. He had a couple of big moments, but moment to moment, fight round to round, he was just not doing nearly enough to keep this fight in control. So Abus was still able to climb back into it and get a good win. It was a fun fight for what it was. Just kind of sloppy, low-level middleweight bout. That brings us to a heavyweight fight. Kennedy Nzechukwu against Chris Barnett. And another fight to make you sad. Barnett coming out with all the vibes, all the sad backstory. Had to call off his most recent fight because of tropical storm damage, all the stuff he's gone through, the ACL recovery. And they're like, oh my God, it's a miracle. He came back from this, or Achilles injury, rather. He came back from this Achilles injury so fast. Isn't that amazing? And then he goes out there and injures his leg jumping in the pre-fight intro and injures it more throwing a wheel kick. And one of the things that happens when you have a really brutal leg injury is you tend to make yourself more prone to other leg injuries because you change your gait to compensate for that injury, especially if you're rushing back the way Barnett did. You're almost certainly doing things to favor that injury. And when you do things to favor a foot injury, you're usually putting more, usually if you have one knee injury, you're going to be really prone to injuring your other knee because you're going to put a lot more weight and pressure on that other knee to try to take the weight off of your other knee injury. So I can't be surprised that Barnett was primed for another leg injury in the in getting, in rushing back from his Achilles injury. It just seems like sad stuff. Is a sad way for that fight to end. And is what it is. Somebody asking, is Kenny Nzechukwu dad enough to stay at heavyweight? Look, he's 6'5", so if I were in charge of making divisions, of running the Performance Institute and telling guys what to do, I would tell Kennedy and Zetu he needs to be a heavyweight just because cutting weight to 205 with his frame is stupid. But he is absolutely and obviously not dad enough to be a heavyweight. We saw, like, he had the moment he beat Chris Barnett, and DC's in there interviewing him, and he's like, well, thank you, sir. And yeah, I would really like to have more good fights at heavyweight, sir. And he's a 32-year-old, 6'5" man who talks like a 12-year-old who just got his first paper route. Like, he is the opposite of dad enough. The confidence to be a great heavyweight is not there at all. He's got all the size. He even showed some good form. He fought long, which I really like to see for a fighter as big as he is against Barnett. But if he were, he's been 6'5" and huge his whole life. If he were confident enough to fight other huge guys, he wouldn't have gone to light heavyweight in the first place. So I don't know. I get the feeling the first guy his own size that he fights is just going to push him around and hit him hard and put him on the back foot and make him terribly unsure of himself. But if he's fighting guys like Barnett, I'm going to pick him every time because Barnett is a ton of fun and a fun meme fighter, but he's not going to beat big heavyweights. It's just not going to happen. You could, I guess, if we need to pick a fight for Zetu at heavyweight, I know it's just his first time up there, but he's had enough success already to be knocking on the door of the top 15. Could do something like Mick Parkin or Shamil Gaziev in there. Those would both be solid fights for him. Could even see going as high up as maybe Marcos Rogerio de Lima is ranked 14th in that division and coming off a win. So, or even Jairzinho Rosenstruik, I could see doing that. I don't know that he would win those fights, but I'm for it. The big Usman, oh man, I don't want to see that. The big Usman is terrible, and those two would just stare at each other. I don't want that. All right. That brings us to a featherweight bout. Farid Basharat, Victor Hugo, and all of my love goes to Farid Basharat right now. Not because I am the kind of person who really hates people who miss weight. I'm not Eddie. I don't care as much. Although Victor Hugo missing weight by 10 pounds made me absolutely happy to see him lose and made me willing to score any round for him, no matter his success. But one of the big things that I have long felt and harped on about over the years is hearing fighters all the time talk about, oh my God, if your opponent misses weight by like 1 or 2 pounds or whatever, any weight miss is a huge advantage for them. And, weight bullies are like terrible. And oh my God, my opponent missed weight. They don't punish you enough for missing weight. So like, and certainly in Silva's case, or in Hugo's case, rather, than not punishing him enough for missing weight because this fight shouldn't have happened. Farid Basharat should never have been asked to take a fight with an opponent 10 pounds overweight. That should just be written off automatically. You shouldn't be putting fighters in a position where they have to decide themselves whether they want to take that fight or not. But one of my long-held feelings is you hear fighters talk about this all the time, and it's just like we see heavyweights fight guys that are 20 pounds heavier than them all the time. And I know it skews when you get bigger. It means less. But 1 pound shouldn't make a difference. If 1 pound is the difference between you winning and losing a fight, you're not good enough. you're not better enough than your opponent to be meaningfully better than your opponent for me to feel like a judge needs to be awarding fights in your favor. If 1 pound is the operational threshold by which you win and lose, then your game is too limited. And Farid Basharat went out there and proved that absolutely correct. Because Victor Hugo looked massive. He looked dangerous. He hit Basharat really hard. And Basharat just fought way better than him. Just took all the opportunities, made the most of them, landed good counters, took top control whenever it was offered, landed good shots, and made the most of winning a fight. So I'm sorry to all the fighters, even fighters I love that are, constantly like, oh my God, missing weight is the worst thing you can do. Never want my opponent to miss weight. They should punish these fighters way more, take more money, take a point from them, make it so they can't win, all that stuff. It's like, look, if you honestly don't think you can beat somebody because they come in 1 pound over, don't fight them. Just don't take the fight. It's your right. And I don't think you should have to. But if that is truly the mark between you winning and you losing, it's not the weight. It's you. I'm sorry. And I'm saying that is the most couch fan bullshit asshole take that I have. That is my most armchair quarterback bullshit take out there. But Basharat proves me correct, so I'm gonna stick to it. All right, that brings us to a middleweight bout. Ismail Naurdiev, Bruno Silva. This fight sucked. It shouldn't have happened. Naurdiev looked better than Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva looked like he doesn't want to fight anymore. He has been washed since the moment Gerald Meerschaert outboxed him. And the dude just does not have it. He got solved, and getting solved broke his confidence, and there is nothing left there that makes a fun fighter. He shouldn't be in the UFC. Naurdiev, I'm happy for him. It sounds like he's had a pretty hard luck story, and he went through he lost a bunch on the regionals too. He's been going through tough times. He didn't expect to get this call. It didn't make any sense that he got this call, but he made the most of it. So good for him. He still did not look great. He did not look like he could really take over this fight against a guy who did not want to fight at all. So this fight did not need to be happening at this level. Shouldn't have been happening at this level. Bruno Silva shouldn't be here. And I guess they'll find something to do with Ismail Naurdiev, but he's just going to fight anyone better in that division and wash out pretty soon. So it sucked. Shouldn't be happening. That finally brings us to Rinat Fakhretdinov, Carlos Leal. And this is a straight up robbery. Might be one of the worst robberies of the year. I can see arguments for Naurdiev, or for Fakhretdinov rather, winning a round. I can even see ways that you could potentially, if you are squinting and dazed and on drugs, giving Fakhretdinov 2 rounds. I see the argument for it. The thing is that round after round after round, every round of that fight, Fakhretdinov was doing just a little bit less. He was doing less damage. He was landing the lesser shots. He was fighting from behind all the way through that fight. And that narrative... No. Somebody saying the crowd had influence. There was no crowd. There were 5 people in the building when that fight happened. I don't know what had an influence. There was no crowd. The judges weren't even local. They were international judges. This was not like hometown cooking in any way, shape, or form, unless unless somebody in Abu Dhabi is paying big money for Rinat Fakhretdinov wins and the judges were just bought and paid for. There was no crowd. Do not tell me this crowd erupted. One person yelling "yay" is not an eruption. It sputtered. No, that fight is an absolute robbery. The narrative of that fight was that Fakhratinov was fighting from behind in every round, and three judges not being able to see that and figure that out is a tragedy. Like I don't understand it. So that to me, terrible judging. Much more so than most back and forth fights where I can see arguments for both sides, because I can see arguments for both sides here. But usually when I can see an argument for both sides, it's like one guy got really held against the cage for a whole round, and his opponent like hit him in the ear from around the side in that round, and you're like, oh, did the ear punches count for more than the cage holding? Both men fought a terrible round. I can see it going either way. Leal did not fight any terrible rounds. He fought well all the way through. He fought a good fight. He was in control. He did not deserve to lose this fight. It's just terrible. That's the end of my rant, though, and that's the end of the show. I don't have any bonus content for you today. Not going to rate going through rating the whole card. Honestly, I'll give it a 4.5. Great pay-per-view. Really well done. Ups, downs, controversies, a boring fight or two, big KOs, couple submissions, everything I want. So I will give it a 4.5. The sadness brings that half star down of seeing Holloway get knocked out and of seeing Whittaker get face cranked and get his face mangled. But thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find me on Substack, zanesimon.substack.com. Support our Substack, the Vivisection 6th Round Substack, and I appreciate all of you. Thanks a lot, and have a good night, everybody.